Long ago, on a cliff illuminated by the sun's rays, there was a fabulous, beautiful kingdom of Nyanda. His people worshipped the goddess of mercy, Verdelia, and lived every day in prosperity. However, 100 years ago, the kingdom was engulfed in war, and evil demons appeared who were eager to seize its territory. Gradually, being a hostage of war, Nyanda turned into ruins. Only after a long time did the Great War finally end in victory. And thanks to the restored peace, the kingdom of Nyanda was at the very height of its history. Despite the early morning, the market was bustling. The merchant was glad to see his old acquaintance. He was eager to chat with the woman. But as she came closer, his smile faded and she looked depressed. His first thought was that the princess had done something wrong again, and he had hit the bull's eye. The woman clutched her head in despair, confirming his assumption. There are terrible rumors that she can use a person as a footstool, and her holy sword has long been covered in blood. The merchant replied in surprise that he thought it was just rumors, unable to cope with his emotions. The woman screamed, everything was much worse. Realizing that she needed to be quieter, the maid lowered her voice and whispered about the vandalism and horrors that the princess was committing within the castle walls. The woman knew she should stop, but the desire to speak out was stronger. The other day, the princess burst into the throne room and loudly announced that she was disgusted by marriage. Words cannot describe the expressions on the faces of the royal family. You just had to see it. Forgetting his title, the king walked up to his daughter on wobbly legs, asking why such thoughts had suddenly taken up residence in her little head. Her fiancé was also quite shocked, and in an ingratiating tone, he asked if he had done anything disrespectful to her. Continuing to wail in a thin voice, this goldfinch reached for her hand, intending to kiss it once again. The young girl was irritated. How much more could this go on? Her sensitive ears were only thirsting for the end of this whining. She grabbed the frail prince and threw him onto the bend, and even sat on top. The father, accustomed to such behavior from his daughter, could only shed tears, but not interfere. To avoid war, the old man once again had to fall to his knees and ask for forgiveness. The maid remembered this with horror, covering her face. She hoped that she had just had a nightmare. Because of the princess, every day there was a new problem in the royal castle. The merchant drew his eyebrows together sympathetically. He tried to think of a way to stop the princess, but remembering her image, he stopped. Both he and his interlocutor shuddered. It was simply impossible. The woman turned her gaze to the square where the statue of the kingdom's hero was located. One way or another, the princess is a descendant of that same great knight Arthur, who saved the kingdom from destruction 100 years ago. Having overheard their conversation, an acquaintance joined them. But what use was she? After all, the princess is very vicious and always uses her mighty power against them. But her ancestors took upon themselves the obligation to subdue the demons and protect their kingdom. Demons or monsters will not come near it. Another young man joined the discussion. He has a friend who lives on the outskirts of the kingdom and can now sleep peacefully. This is wonderful. Besides, the story about the princess's adventures is very popular with children. His little girl constantly asks him to tell stories about her. So despite her character, they should all be grateful to the princess for the advent of a peaceful era. The others picked up these words, praising the princess, and the maid involuntarily grimaced. The woman felt as if her friends had betrayed her. What were these people even talking about? The fear and envy of the people towards the princess was incredibly huge. According to stories, the princess considers herself the center of the universe. She also does whatever she wants, which makes her more like a tyrant than a savior. The king had to settle all the incidents. What was the incident with the lizard's head worth alone? The old man could hardly cope with the incoming complaints, as there were too many of them. Day by day, the damage only increased, until one fine day. The old man was so exhausted by this point that he did not react at all to the cry of his subject. He took a noisy sip of tea and asked what had happened. However, from his heavy sigh, one could tell that the king was quite tired and upset. The messenger struggled with heavy breathing, squeezing out one word at a time. The princess is heading here right now. The hand holding the mug of aromatic tea trembled. According to the latest information, the young lady should have been on Hell Beach, 12,000 degrees, the monster habitat, the most comfortable place for her. The old man tried to take a sip of tea to calm his nerves, but only spilled it even more. His voice was hoarse and barely audible when he asked if she was on holiday now. The subject's voice sounded even worse when he reported the telegram he had received. which was already approaching the royal castle. Before the young man could finish his sentence, the front doors burst open with a bang, causing them both to jump. But the image of the lady who entered was definitely not frightening. She addressed her daddy with love in her voice. Her languid eyes sparkled like precious stones. She was finally back. Both the king and his servant froze in shock, because the princess was wearing a dress. The old man turned his puzzled gaze to his subordinate, but he himself did not understand what was happening. When the princess noticed that her daddy was not paying attention to her, her tone became cold. She looked at his face and her eyebrows dropped. He must have been sad in her absence. The king nervously wiped the sweat from his face. It was just that she appeared before him in such an unusual outfit. He screamed in his mind and almost had a heart attack. He asked Atina what prompted her to make such a decision while the girl was showing off her dress. Turning away in embarrassment, she said, "She is a lady after all. Sometimes she just wants to flutter like a spring breeze." Everyone present in the hall shuddered, remembering the everyday image of this spring breeze. Edina continued to play the role of an embarrassed girl, but in truth, she hurried to the castle because she wanted to tell her father something. With a thunderous scream that made everyone's eardrums ring, the girl announced her impending marriage. There was silence in the room for a very, very long time. The king knew that he was long past the age to experience an existential crisis, but it seemed that one had finally arrived. The walls of the castle shook from his hysterical scream.
For 22 whole years, she was indifferent to all living beings, not to mention men. Remember the same rejected prince.
And now she herself spoke about marriage. This amazing event. His Majesty was incredibly shocked, and he, as a servant, would have to console him. Well, when he looked at the old man, he was surprised to realize that he, on the contrary, was inspired. The old king laughed loudly and danced, his joy uncontrollably. The word marriage came from the lips of his princess. And when did she become so grown up? He, as a father, sincerely respects his daughter's decision. He squeezed her palms, pulling her along with him into the dance. The young man didn't know what to think. What the hell was going on? Etna began to complain to her father in an exaggeratedly upset voice, but she always ruined everything, and it seemed to her that he would be against it. The king wiped away tears of joy. Sometimes she makes him nervous, but how can he go against her will? He will be saved. She finally met her soulmate. He will be free. All these 22 years he took care of the princess. I put up with my daughter's frightening behavior and threats. These were such long and hard years. But now he is grateful to the goddess of mercy. Verdelia. The long-awaited ringing of church bells was already in his ears. He was so happy that his daughter was getting married. He doesn't know who was so unlucky with such a tyrant, but he's glad that she's now his headache. Having mentally said goodbye to Atina, the king hoped that her character would change after marriage. I hope his dear future son-in-law, whoever he may be, will be able to live in peace, dreaming of a brilliant future. The old man stared into space with an empty gaze. It seemed that a little more, and he would let out a thread of drool. Taking the hand of his beloved daughter, he asked who the man was that she wanted to marry. Perhaps it is a prince from a nearby kingdom, or a noble heir, a farmer or a soldier. After these words, Atina's behavior changed slightly. She stepped back. Her father reassured her. He would accept anyone. When she said it was the Demon King, the old man almost choked on his own bile. When his daughter, her eyes sparkling, repeated her desire to marry the Demon King, her father realized that he had heard right. The announcement of the princess's marriage quickly spread throughout the kingdom. The subjects happily chatted in the street about how wonderful it was that they were able to witness this moment. Some blessed her without knowing the details. Some remained indifferent. There were also those who did not believe in it and called it madness. Many people guessed what a handsome man Princess Atina's fiancé would be. In general, this news was trumpeted from every street in the city. But in the castle, it was the most disturbing and loud time in the last 100 years. There was not a moment when silence returned to the royal chambers. The windows in the castle were cracked from the screams. The king has forgotten the last time he ate and slept, and he himself is about to go mad. Count Nektu von Damon continued to ignore His Majesty's condition, showing his displeasure. Throughout the centuries, their kingdom existed in fear of demons. 100 years ago, there was a war that took the lives of many people. Fortunately, thanks to the knight Arthur, they restored peace again. Countless people were killed by demons. The leather glove creaked as the count clenched his fist in rage. And how after this could a descendant of the knight Arthur tie the knot with a demon? Having imagined this picture, the king turned cold with horror, and Arthur would have turned over in his grave from what he heard. The old man's tired mind reproduced this picture too literally. He almost burst into tears from grief. It seemed it was time to start begging for forgiveness. The count asked him to stop crying and gave him advice that now was the time to show his strong character. A confident voice came from behind them, and he had a different opinion on the matter. Seeing a familiar face, His Majesty came to his senses for a short while. The young man grinned and bowed politely in greeting. This short guy, Shane Vicon, is a scientist from the university and also the princess's childhood friend and advisor. An enraged Count Damon turned his gaze to His Majesty, hoping that he would share his anger, but there was no trace of him. The old man seemed to have regained his youth, and like a mountain goat, joyfully ran towards Shane. Oh, this wonderful young man! He will definitely save him from all his problems and solve the situation. Watching them exchange pleasantries, Count Damon felt like a third wheel. Minutes passed. This Shane continued to chatter about his work. The man gradually began to boil. His Highness squeezed the advisor's thin hand with fatherly love. He must try to visit the old man, at least occasionally. The young man's eyes became slightly moist. He was touched by His Majesty's words. And by the way, isn't he the only one who can pacify their princess? Shane's eyes instantly dried up. He was so brilliant that he could handle the princess from a young age. Memories of his adolescence, full of pain and suffering, flashed before the advisor's eyes. Since Shane is her close friend, she trusts him more than anyone else. Oh, how lucky she is to have such a reliable person like him by her side. The young man felt his knees shaking under the weight of these words. He also doesn't support her decision to marry a demon, but they should trust the princess more. The count had the impression that he was in a mental hospital. Who in their right mind could say such a thing? He shielded His Majesty from this scoundrel, as if his words would not reach his ears. Even if the world collapses, this cannot be allowed. It will disgrace the honor of the knight Arthur. Continuing to point his finger in front of his nose, Sir Nectu continued to shout for His Majesty not to listen to him. Shane's face turned purple, wondering if he was being too stubborn for a civil servant. The old man felt despair. The two of them clashed heads, like a fire dragon and a snow leopard. It didn't take long for things to come to blows, and the king felt like a mother hen watching two roosters fight. Despite the fact that Shane was inferior in terms of physical data, he still decided to defend the honor of his girlfriend. The princess has always served the people and done more than anyone else. This should not be ignored. So she also has the right to personal happiness. And they can take advantage of this chance and establish friendly relations with the Demon King. Count Damon almost picked a lock of his hair after these words. Yes, this charlatan is talking complete nonsense. The fight has resumed again. The man lay on the floor trying to catch his breath. He couldn't bear to hear this nonsense any longer. He seemed to be in the throes of hysteria, and with each sentence, his voice grew thinner. Sir Nectu kicked his legs in the air like a child. This marriage cannot take place. His Highness, with a heavy heart, tried to calm the poor mentally ill man, but all was in vain. The Count's gaze truly became insane. He muttered something incoherently about the demon taking over the princess's mind. Gradually, his voice became quieter, and his words became incomprehensible. He staggered, fearfully assuming that it had already happened. Shane was beside himself. What rude things this count was saying. At that moment, a girl's voice came from behind the door, which terrified everyone. She completely agreed with Count Damon. The chiseled silhouette of the princess floated into the hall. Enjoying the swaying of the multi-layered skirts, Atina came closer and measured them with a laughing look. None of them are interested in this engagement. They are discussing such funny things here. His Majesty was already immune to his daughter's appearance, but the advisor and the count saw her for the first time. They rubbed their eyes. You never know. They were imagining a princess in a dress. Recent enemies, but now allies in the current situation, cling to each other. Having cleared his throat, His Majesty, in an ingratiating tone, asked his daughter what brought her here. Etna laughed thinly. Nothing special. Just dropped in to see how her wedding planning was going. She added that, by the way, she heard everything while she was standing behind the door. She heard everything they said about her. She was simply overcome with curiosity. They could continue their conversation. There was something in her voice that made the two men flinch. As for her ancestors, the princess swam closer. causing the Count to break out in a cold sweat. The man trembled, unable to come up with an excuse. She stamped her heavy foot, capable of breaking every bone in his body, and Sir Nectu fell to the floor in fear. And now the young lady resembled an approaching storm that would erase everything in its path. She grabbed the sword. But how dare he take an oath before this sacred weapon? Shane felt he needed to intervene before something irreversible happened. Smiling predatorily, Etina nudged the Count's chin with the tip of her sword. The girl was overcome with mania. She enjoyed the horror that had seized the man. The Count understood that one wrong word, and nothing would save him. The advisor awkwardly shifted his feet, trying to persuade the princess to calm down. Sir Nectu wasn't sincere when he said this. They are all just curious as to why the girl made such a decision. Etina listened and turned her cold, soulless eyes to her friend. She lowered her sword and asked if they were so interested in her love story. Etina laughed contentedly. Then she had no choice. Count Daemon fell into silent hysterics. Having assumed a dramatic pose, the princess prepared to begin her story. She looked up at the ceiling. It had happened not long ago, on the day she had finished conquering the monsters. The territory of the northwestern border was occupied by demons during her winter vacation, and then she had to urgently set out to conquer them. Her regiment was met with hostility. The demons were outraged at how these little people dared. The princess dismounted, her heavy armor rattling, as they had invaded their domain. The young lady only had to look at the demons to see their legs begin to tremble. They heard a story about a princess who catches demon children and can kill a dragon with one hand. The legendary hand moved in their direction, and the little demons trembled. She gave them 5 seconds. If they disappear from sight during this time, then she will, of course, spare their lives. Bending her fingers, Etina began to count off 5 seconds. Sometimes she looks more like demons than the demons themselves. The princess counted down the last seconds as the atmosphere around her changed subtly. Taking a fighting stance, she drew her sacred sword. What kind of wind is this? She peered intently into the spreading fog, trying to spot the figure of the enemy. And then she met him. He gave off a cold aura that gave her goosebumps and delight at the same time. His gaze was so sharp that it instantly pierced her heart. Enchanted, Princess Etina hesitated for a moment, and an explosion was heard. But the young lady was much stronger than she seemed. She managed to jump back in time, she cursed. The demon was quite strong. It seemed that he couldn't be stopped with just a sword, which made her want to know who he was even more. Before she entered the battle, she gripped the sword handle more tightly. She had to find out. Pushing off the ground, the princess lunged forward and entered into a furious fight with the mysterious enemy. Her eyes widened in surprise when she realized that her opponent's cloak was so strong that even her sword couldn't cut it. He irritates her so much, and when she looked closer, she was surprised to notice a broken horn. Her enemy decided to retreat to catch his breath. Now that she could get a better look at his face, she was sure that he was the Demon King. His voice was velvety, just as she imagined. No need to spill blood in vain. He turned around, ordering his subordinates to leave. Etina asked him to stop with desperation in her voice. But the demon did not want to listen to her pleas. He dissolved into the air like a mirage. Princess Etina was left standing alone in the middle of the destroyed battlefield, surrounded by the corpses of her own fallen soldiers. The girl sighed dreamily. From that day on, she could not forget him. Sighing languidly, she clutched the hem of her dress, such feelings overcoming her for the first time. This demon is charismatic, majestic, and has a strong character. Remembering his beautiful face, the girl squealed with delight. With those big eyes, he reminded her of a cute little deer, and those reddened ears of his, and even his chopped-off horn, touched her. The men present in the hall could no longer hear it. They preferred to die. Shane was gloomy. Did the princess decide to marry the Demon King just because he had good looks? Of course, his handsome face, tall stature, and good physique were all great. But most importantly, she had never met anyone as strong as her to fight on par with her. He is the first one whose strength is almost equal to hers. The only one she fell in love with at first sight. Isn't it fate? Etina looked at the others with a menacing gaze, and they nodded like dummies, agreeing with her. Princess Etina is in a whirlwind dance, so right now she will ask the Demon King to marry her. The Demon King looked up at his subject in disbelief, hoping that this was just a joke. He didn't want to. The demon was at a loss, if he was so sure. Then what excuse could he use to refuse? The king sighed. He wasn't going to satisfy the people's needs. Why would he marry this princess? Let them send something smart or something like that in return. His gaze was giving me goosebumps. Let him stop talking this nonsense immediately. His irritated voice echoed within the walls of the royal castle. The king was delighted, that's how. He even felt sorry for his daughter for a moment. The young lady showed absolutely no reaction to this recording. She continued to stare at the screen. The father, remembering his duties, began to console her. Maybe she was denied marriage, but they could continue to insist on their own. And the world is huge, and there are still many men. And this one is just an idiot. Atina sighed languidly, clasping her hands together. Everything was fine. Nothing could be done. She knew that she was asking too much, but she was still grateful to her father for his support. She made a farewell curtsy, in which case perhaps she would return to her chambers. The king's bushy eyebrows shot up, unbelievable. This was the first time he had seen his daughter like this. He thought she would throw a tantrum, but she patiently accepted the answer. His heart started to fail, as if this was not their princess. Shane watched her retreating figure with amazement. Did the princess really fall in love? Night fell. The castle was silent, but one soul could not sleep. Feeling sadness in her heart, Princess Atina went out onto the balcony to get some fresh air. She sat down on the railing, letting the light breeze blow through her hair and the thin fabric of her nightgown. Suddenly, there was a quiet knock on the door. A familiar voice announced that it was Shane. The girl did not take her eyes off the stars in the sky, which brought him there at such a late hour. The advisor sighed sympathetically. He came to check if everything was okay with her. The princess grinned. He thought she would cry her eyes out. She can make many men cry because of her. But to make her cry because of some guy, she laughed with a throaty laugh. But Shane insisted on his own. He is worried about her, because she has always been indifferent to everyone. The young lady jumped down from the parapet and turned away. He shouldn't worry. She was silent, lost in thought, and contemplating the shining stars. Etna now understands that she cannot get everything she wants, and she will not stand her ground until the end of time. She is sorry that her first love ended so quickly. Now she has to finish her studies. Her friend answered so quietly that she didn't immediately understand the words. He would always support her like this. There was something in his voice that made her heart skip a beat. Slightly embarrassed, Atina smiled, and she was grateful to him for that. Settling closer to Shane, she changed the subject. Sir Nektu must be incredibly pleased with the latest news. The advisor sighed heavily, seeming to be shaken by the news that she had decided to make an offering to the demons. The young gentleman ignored her joke and asked a question that had been interesting to him for a long time. But how did she come up with such an idea? Nothing special. Instead of suffering from being rejected, the princess decided to take advantage of this opportunity and establish friendly relations. Filled with pride for her, Shane wiped away a stingy tear. His girlfriend cared so much about her kingdom. The princess misjudged her strength and poked Shane in the side. He was still the same crybaby. Early in the morning, the sound of horses' hooves woke up the inhabitants of the castle, and a carriage drove out of its borders. One of the guards, opening the gate, told his partner that this was a cart that was being sent as a tribute to the demon kingdom. He couldn't believe his ears. What the hell were they sending something to these demons? The princess was rejected, after which she declared her intention to stop the senseless war with the demon kingdom and make peace. Watching the carriage move away, the king chuckled contentedly. If the princess can finally make peace with the demon kingdom, they will finally have peace and quiet. Despite being refused marriage, she decided to help bring about reconciliation by making an offering, thereby raising the status of the kingdom. The king praised the advisor with fatherly pride. Shane is a good man. But the young man had no idea why His Majesty was praising him. The king couldn't just believe that the offering to the demon kingdom was his daughter's personal decision. He asked to repeat it. In confirmation of his thought that everything in their kingdom was not always quiet and smooth, a cry was heard from a subject that they were in trouble. His Majesty did not ask what happened, because he already knew the answer to this question. It was Princess Atina, who, of course, went with the carriage to the demon kingdom. The scream that echoed through the castle walls was deafening. Unfortunately, the carriage was too far away to be within his reach. As she lounged in the shaking carriage, the princess felt a slight twinge of regret. She could not believe that she had managed to fool everyone so easily. The thought of the demon king made her smile excitedly. How dare he reject her? Let him just wait. She will do such things to him that he will not be able to live without her. It was already late at night, but the Demon King still had not slept. Something was bothering him. The marriage proposal, the suspicious carriage, it was all strange. The servant entered the chambers silently and bowed. A carriage sent from the kingdom of Nyanda should arrive soon. Without reacting to his words, the king sent his servant on his way. The cut-off horn itched, and his head was swelling because of these people. Another demon, who had silently entered his chambers, agreed with him. Until yesterday they sent troops to conquer, but after being refused marriage, they suddenly send them tribute. What is happening in this kingdom? Ignoring Dagel's attempt to start a conversation, the king swam past him. He was tired and asked not to be disturbed. The annoying demon nodded and muttered to himself, "He has something. He will send the king a fine medicine to help relieve his fatigue." Daigle grinned when the cart arrived to tire him out even more. The cab driver shouted that the king's castle was right ahead. One of the soldiers passed on a message to the entire procession. They would soon be there. The soldiers had better stand around the cart. Suddenly, his eyes caught sight of a rapidly approaching sand cloud. He narrowed his eyes. He seemed to know this man, despite the terrible grimace. It was Sir Shane. While the royal family was going about their business, the procession decided to take a break and water the horses. But none of the soldiers were able to sleep. The advisor's cries echoed throughout the entire area. How dare she do this, deceive them, and then steal the cart? The princess straightened the clothes that had caused her friend such indignation and lazily commented on how noisy he was. The girl smiled contentedly, with all 32 teeth, and assured him that he need not worry, since she had a plan. Shane felt like he was on the edge. He grabbed his girlfriend by the chest. If she gets caught, the kingdom is finished. What is she going to do when the castle arrives? Etna was proud of her brilliant plan, so let him listen carefully. She would tell it to him only once. When they arrive at the castle, they will tell the king about the offering they have brought, and then she will say that she is a servant. That is why she is in this form. And when the servants who were sent as an offering appear before the king, that's when it all begins. Edina developed a tactic of behavior where when the demon king passed by her, she would raise her head and look straight at the king. He will, of course, be embarrassed and blush. The kingdom has never seen a girl of such striking beauty. After that, he would come closer and gently hug her shoulders. At the thought of this, everything inside Atina trembled. She could already imagine how beautiful his face would be up close when he proposed to her. Of course, for the sake of appearances, she will have to put up a show, as befits a real lady. She will press him closer, squeeze his slender body with all her might. Of course, she just doesn't know. Squealing like a little girl and kicking her legs in the air, she explained in great detail what and how she would do next with the king. Shane had never heard anything so traumatic in his life. He prayed to God for the opportunity to go deaf. Finally, they arrived, so the advisor took the opportunity to escape. He must be a delegation. Finally, he threatened her. He was ready to beg her. Just let him not bring everything to a catastrophe. The demon loudly announced that the king was about to appear, and the delegation of the Nyanda kingdom should line up at the entrance. Princess Atina snorted haughtily. Shane was talking about her as if she were a disaster. But now is not the time for resentment. She needs to get in the mood and follow her plan faithfully. I wonder how quickly she could defeat the Demon King. The thought made her hands itch to grab a sword. The front doors slowly swung open. The princess bit her lip in anticipation. Ah, that chiseled face, that emerald eyes, and that cute little lopsided horn. Unable to bear it, the young lady raised her head slightly to get a better look at him. Like a predator, she devoured the Demon King's figure with her eyes. Demons can look so cool. Shane obligingly handed the letters to the king and asked him to look at the offering they had prepared for him. The demon nodded silently and headed towards the carriage. Closer and closer, Atina could hardly contain her laughter. Everything was going according to plan. One step, a little more, just a little bit more almost. She straightened up, ready to show off all her charm. Right now, she opened her beautiful shining purple eyes. Her lips stretched into a sweet smile. It wasn't for nothing that she had spent hours practicing in front of the mirror. Oh yes! She felt the king's gaze change, and his heart beat faster. Of course, he was captivated by her beauty and charisma. It was a special moment when two hearts beat in unison. Turning away, the Demon King moved further towards the carriage. But Atina squealed to herself. It worked. The mission was accomplished. She was proud of herself. The king was caught, that expression on his face. He must have fallen in love with her right there and then. The demons surrounded their master, obediently accepting the orders from his lips. When he turned towards Atina, about to say something, the girl's heart began to beat faster. She felt incredibly pleased when the Demon King singled her out from the other maids. The king's voice was unusually cold as he ordered her to be arrested right now. The girl felt extremely insulted when the king suggested that she was the murderer hiding among the offerings. The look she had given him before was full of cruelty, and he grimaced. Edna couldn't believe that everything had turned out this way when the guards headed towards her. They twisted her arms, ordering the suspicious lady to surrender right now, and without any sudden movements. The princess was overcome with irritation. Everything had turned out absolutely differently than she had planned. Shane, as the only sane person here, tried to appeal to the Demon King. This maid is not suspicious at all. On the contrary, she is one of the most elite maids in their kingdom. Sure, she looks a little scary and has a rough personality. Atina mentally called him an idiot. But still, this girl is not a murderer. They would not have acted so vilely. On behalf of themselves and the entire delegation, Shane guarantees this. He turned towards the princess, asking her to confirm his words. Tears of despair flooded Shane's entire face. Unfortunately, his status did not allow him to curse the princess. Laughing madly, the young lady shared her story. She wanted to work for the Demon King, so she volunteered. The demon looked at her skeptically. Well, if she says so, she can be let go. Shane felt a weight lift from his heart. At least this time everything had gone right. Listening to the demoness's orders, something she had never had to do in her life, made the princess even angrier than before. Then she'll have to go to Plan B, buy some time and work as a maid. And as soon as she gets the chance, she will make the Demon King her own. A couple of weeks later, Princess Atina was ready to rage, every joint in her body aching uncontrollably. And what is she doing here? She came here for the king, now. The demoness scolded her in a motherly way, saying that she had told her to do something. So why was she just falling apart here? She paused awkwardly as Tina pointed to all the polished goblets. In any case, the demoness waved it off. She had something to tell the girl. The young lady must know that there will soon be a party at the castle, and she will be serving the guests. The princess's eyes sparkled. The demoness continued to recite the rules in an important tone as the princess swirled her around in her arms. Someone stood behind the door and eavesdropped as the demoness spat discontentedly at the nasty girl. The woman laughed at her, rejoicing, not even knowing what would happen there. She walked away, muttering to herself, "Human being, what nonsense." So, the day of the long-awaited dinner party has arrived. The guests chatted with each other and enjoyed the wine, but the Demon King sat alone. The unfortunate Princess Atina, as planned, was sent to serve as a servant for dinner. The young lady had been looking for an excuse to catch the king's eye all evening, and now she was finally ordered to serve him soup. Suddenly, her hand shook, perhaps on purpose, and all the soup spilled. The demon sitting nearby watched her awkward movements and the liquid spreading across the table with disapproval. Atina made her voice thinner and more gentle, and awkwardly muttered an apology. She would clean everything up right now. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw the Demon King's green eyes widen in surprise, and a blush appear on his cheeks. The princess had everything under control. She deliberately tousled her hair and moistened her eyes to appear cuter. The demon's heart will not be able to resist. And so everything happened just as she planned. Coming dangerously close, the Demon King grabbed her wrist and insistently told her that she shouldn't bother herself. He pulled her closer to him, sharply, and quietly asked, in an ingratiating voice, so that the other guests would not hear, if she was free tonight. Princess Atina's bubble of beautiful fantasies burst, and she inflated herself. This would be the perfect plan. She rolled her eyes in irritation and exhaled loudly. But the king was too far away from her. The princess didn't have a chance to get closer to him. Towards the end of the event, the demoness called all the maids to give them orders. So each maid will be introduced to the nobles, and she will be engaged in serving their king. Atina choked enviously. The girl indignantly clutched her apron in her hands. And what about her? The main one. She looked around thoughtfully. And Tina will serve that nobleman over there. He was the ugliest creature the girl had ever seen in her life. The irritation continued to build up inside her. She believed that this was a great opportunity to get closer to the king, but it was snatched from under her nose again. The next dish on the menu, ogre eye stew, was something disgusting and slimy bubbling in the bowls. Now the princess has no chance. She can only be content with the fact that she can at least see his beautiful face from a distance. She continued to move along the table, occasionally glancing at the Demon King, when something made her freeze in place in surprise. Wait a second. Why was this smell so familiar to her? She sniffed. The smell was coming from the king's plate. She couldn't remember exactly, but there was something wrong with him. She cursed when she realized the king was about to try the dish. With all her strength, and there was a lot of it in the girl's body, Atina ran forward, jumped onto the table, and knocked over the plate. With a swift and precise blow, she knocked the spoon out of the Demon King's hands. The demon pierced her with an enraged look and roared, ordering her to catch the maid right now. Atina wasn't scared at all. He didn't need to focus his attention on her now. She pointed downwards with her gaze. The maids began to scream as they followed him. The stew hissed and bubbled, burning everything around and emitting stinking smoke. The girl did not miss the opportunity to make a disgruntled comment about the fact that demons are completely unable to distinguish smells. It is a terrible poison that instantly spreads throughout the body as soon as it touches the tip of the tongue. The demons in the hall whispered in shock, wondering if this man should be trusted. Did this mean there was a murderer in the castle? A hoarse, drawn-out voice spoke, attracting everyone's attention. The guests fell silent. As for this poison, Daigle also knows something about it. A malicious grin spread across his face. The maid just said that this poison is very strong. However, the poisonous plant from which the poison is made only grows in the human world, deep in the forest of the Nyanda kingdom. I wonder how this poison got into the king's castle, and even straight into his food. The imperious Daigle expected trembling knees and girls' tears, but imagine his surprise when he heard hysterical laughter. The girl looked at him with crazy eyes. Did he really suspect her now? The next argument resembled a game of tennis. Daigle attacked. Atina made counter-arguments, and the guests looked from one to the other in surprise. The princess laughed coldly again. If she were so clever, she could behead him in an instant, and not a single mouse would know about it. The demon flashed his one eye. That's a great idea. Even if she's innocent, they can make an example and behead her. While tormenting each other, the opponents almost collided heads. Then they will test it. The Demon King sighed tiredly and waved his hand, ordering them to finish. He agreed with Daigle's words. There was sense in his words. It was all rather suspicious, however, and one should not forget that the maid had just saved his life. They cannot deny this fact because of suspicion. The king ordered the guards to release the lady. Moreover, he deliberately drew out the vowels, looking probingly at each of the guests. This is not the first time there has been an attempt on his life, right? The chair legs creaked loudly. He had no appetite, so today's dinner ended here. Atina continued to stand in place as the Demon King headed towards her. For a moment, her heartbeat quickened, but the demon walked past her with an indifferent face. A new, strange sensation went through the princess as he pinned her to the spot with his snake-like gaze. Now, Atina knew that the king had definitely remembered her, but not in the way she had dreamed of. Yet she was disappointed that he said nothing at all to her. Half an hour later, a furious roar was heard on the lower floors reserved for servants. A female voice, more like screams from the underworld, swore that she would kill this bastard. Etna destroyed her entire room, but her anger did not subside. In a nasal voice, she mimicked Daigle, who had recently suggested beheading her. If it weren't for the king, she would have left no living place of him. At the thought of the king, the storm raging inside her subsided, although her lower lip trembled involuntarily. And the king is good. She may be human, but why does he look at her with such disdain? She stamped her foot and turned away. This wouldn't do anyway, and upon arrival here, and during dinner, she will not tolerate such treatment twice. A hoarse laugh escaped her lips. What should she do with this bastard? Everything inside her sang as she frantically came up with a new plan. He would have to beg her for forgiveness. Opening the window, the princess climbed outside. The night air was so pleasant. Look, she squinted slyly, how many rooms there are! And somewhere among them is the room of the Demon King, where he sleeps sweetly. Her eyes sparkled. She moved forward, trying to come up with an excuse for herself. She will go to him not because she wants to see him, but simply because she wants to ask him about the unfair treatment he has given her. In just a couple of minutes, Atina reached the upper floors and jumped onto the balcony with amazing grace. She opened her mouth in shock and froze in place when she saw a familiar silhouette. The Demon King was still awake, as she had imagined in her sweet fantasies. To avoid detection, the girl hid behind the curtains. So these are his chambers. She was filled with anger on the way here, but when she saw his handsome face, her heart melted. The rustle of fabric and the shine of light hair in the semi-darkness. The girl moved the curtain with interest. Wait a second, the king is not alone here. With a trembling hand, Princess Atina clutched the thin satin, he with the girl. Demon King, her little cute lion cub, her sweet beloved one, has another girl besides her. Let's ignore the fact that Atina was never the Demon King's girlfriend. The princess tried to remain calm. What should she do? Calmly wish him happiness. The princess frowned in frustration. Damn! What should she do? The girl looked into the room again and saw a heartbreaking picture. The king was lying on the woman's lap, and she was stroking his hair. To the silent, jealous cry of Atina, the mysterious woman wished the king good night. Sweet dreams without any worries? She grinned and took something out from under her clothes. The sharp blade was pointed towards the king's neck. May he sleep forever. The woman froze tensely, feeling movement out of the corner of her eye. She squinted her eyes in displeasure and asked in an arrogant voice, "Who is she?" The princess ignored her question, quickly approached and knocked the blade out of her hands. Before the blonde had time to come to her senses, while she was cradling her dislocated arm, Atina raised the dagger. Having pinned the killer's legs so that she could not escape, the girl put a sharp blade to her neck. The woman looked with shocked eyes at the knife and then at the frightening maid. Her gaze was cold and calculating. She resembled a lioness, capable of tearing you to pieces at any moment. Coming to his senses, the Demon King groaned. What was that noise? The mysterious woman took advantage of the moment, wriggled out of the grip, and rushed towards the window. Atina ordered her to freeze, but she was already in the air. The princess cursed. How could she have missed it? A weak voice came from behind her, asking who was there. The Demon King looked unwell, clutching his head as he tried to get out of bed. Why is she here? Recently? His speech became more and more incoherent. He staggered and tried to take a step, but instantly collapsed to the floor. Atina dropped to her knees and shook the demon. He needed to come to his senses. She stopped, feeling his pulse. It was normal. The girl carefully examined his face, his lips slightly parted, his eyelids fluttering. His skin tone was also normal. Snoring peacefully, the Demon King even seemed to be smiling in his sleep. What's wrong with him? Did he just fall asleep? The morning in the Demon Kingdom was gloomy, with virtually no sun. Blinking a couple of times, the Demon King gradually came to his senses. There seems to be something wrong. Why can he feel the sun's rays on his skin? Before he could even begin to wonder why the sun would shine in the underworld, a terrible face jumped out right in front of him. Hanging over the bed and waving cheerfully, Atina wished the ruler of hell a good morning. Still in shock, the demon swore. Etna's special show for a cheerful morning. The best lighting equipment. In the demon world, the morning is always so gloomy, so she prepared the sun for it. Unintentionally switching to informal speech, the girl asked how he had slept. The memories of yesterday were blurry, but the king definitely remembered that she was in his room yesterday. Did she really spend the whole night here? Why didn't she leave? Atina whistled. He didn't order her to leave. The king stared at her. She could have just left him. Last night he heard something about a murderer, and the other day he was almost poisoned. He felt strange and awkward. Everything was going wrong lately. As night fell, Atina sighed heavily. It was not easy, but she did it well. The king stared at her with his 5 kopeck eyes, watching this dramatic performance. He cleared his throat awkwardly before speaking. How did she know that a killer would come to him that night? Unfortunately, Atina didn't think about this part. It's not that important. If he heard everything yesterday, then why did he fall asleep right away? The king's emerald eyes conveyed confusion. Now he reminded Atina of a cute kitten with a broken horn. If kittens had horns, of course. Since childhood, he has been the target of countless attacks, which has made it difficult for him to sleep properly, especially recently. Atina made a worried face. Did he really have insomnia? The king folded his hands. True, but compared to this problem, there is another. Because he can't sleep, at any moment. At the most unexpected moments for him, he can suddenly fall asleep. The princess let out a surprised breath. Wait a minute, in that case, if this happens again, the demon finished for her, right? He could be killed. He tried many ways to cure his insomnia, and the pleaser was one of them. Etna screamed inside, so this wasn't his girl. His voice sounded broken. Now he can't trust anyone at all. Even if the one his subordinates brought turned out to be a murderer, then he no longer has it. Atina didn't let him finish. He wants to get a good night's sleep. She knows one simple way. The king was silent. The princess took advantage of the moment and coquettishly bowed her head, as if he would trust her once. The demon was taken aback, and it was this expression on his face that so touched Princess Atina. To believe a man, before he would have called it absurd, but this maid had already done a lot for him. But maybe he should be trusted just this once. Sometime later, they were standing in a hot, soulless desert. The only thing missing from this cliché was a tumbleweed. The demon frowned slightly and looked around with an uncomprehending gaze. Atina put her hands on her hips, ready to instruct. The king's voice was tense as he asked why the maid had brought him here, and if it had anything to do with the dream. The princess spoke importantly. She brought him here out of respect for him. He doesn't want others to see his weak side. The king raised an eyebrow in confusion. Atina became serious, so he said that he wanted to get a good night's sleep. Was he ready to do everything for this? Still tense, the king nodded with disbelief in his eyes. In that case, he needs to do 100 push-ups, 100 squats, and 100 abdominal exercises. The girl's fighting voice echoed throughout the area. But this is not the end. In addition to this, you need to run 10 kilometers, and this needs to be repeated every day. The king wanted to resist, but the maid sharply shut him up, telling him to be quiet and let him get down to business. Trying to suppress a smile, Atina watched with delight as the muscles of his arm rolled under his clothes, because this handsome man was doing push-ups on just one. Next on the list was mountain climbing. Atina, hanging behind him, did not miss the opportunity to tease him. The view from here was simply incredible, but you can't be kind and gentle forever. During the run, she decided to be tough. Let her run faster. The king's desperate cry echoed throughout the desert, but he could not run any faster. Towards evening, the ruler finally returned to the castle, and he could not express in words how happy he was about it. The fingers holding the pen trembled involuntarily. It wasn't easy. His whole work was hampered by severe muscle pain. For a moment, he opened his eyes, for he felt powerlessness throughout his body, but his heavy eyelids fell again. He tried to fight it, but it seemed like they were getting heavier and heavier, and his head hung limply. For a while, he still tried to maintain his posture in a half-sleep, but eventually gave up. Etna was there to wish him sweet dreams. She carefully picked up the Demon King's thin body to carry him to the bed while she looked after him. Unfortunately, being in love dulls other feelings, because the girl did not notice that they were being watched. The already familiar scarlet lips twisted into a smile. The throne room was filled with desperate cries. The unknown person was asking to kill him. He has always been loyal to him and cannot believe that the lady he sent turned out to be a murderer. There is no better way to pay for sin than to give one's life, so let him kill him. Dagel's forehead was cut and bleeding, and he continued to howl despite the king's request to stop. The Demon King is well aware of his loyalty to the kingdom. Perhaps there was a misunderstanding. As the king said this, he yawned, and both demons froze in place in surprise. Dagel immediately stopped playing the victim and began to test the waters. It was strange to see him yawning. He was used to insomnia and didn't even feel tired. When the king replied that he had been feeling better lately, the demon's face changed almost imperceptibly. Dagel bowed. In the future, he would be even more careful to avoid such incidents in order to show his loyalty to the king. The Demon King tensed slightly as his subordinates spoke about their plan and how the preparations were going. It seemed that the ruler was not happy to talk about this. He brushed it off. There was nothing to worry about. Having listened to his king, Hegel left quickly. Something in the king's behavior made him wary, although he could not yet understand what. Now he resembled a spider sitting on a huge web, one of the threads of which twitched, and he was trying to figure out which one it was. Why did His Majesty suddenly start yawning? This is not a good sign. Hegel could hardly resist the urge to spit. Rumors had reached him that he was hanging out with a human being. He ordered his birds to keep a proper watch on the maid and report any suspicious things to him. And when the chance comes, they must kill her. Atina sneezed loudly, scaring away all the animals in the area. She wiped her nose roughly, apparently allergic to the flowers in the forest. But a saying came to mind. If she sneezes, someone remembers her. But it didn't matter. She turned around sharply and shouted towards the king, "Faster!" As soon as the training was over, the demon fell roughly to the ground. He barely found the strength to crawl to the tree to settle down more comfortably under its shade. Any appearance of him, even a tired one, touched Atina, and she obligingly handed him some water. She felt thirsty too, and reached for a second container. The girl almost choked when the king asked who the hell she really was. A maid who is awkward in addressing people as you. Disrespect for others literally flows in her blood, as if she was originally from a noble family. It was worth mentioning her strength. Wasn't she exactly the same as the princess from the kingdom he had heard so many rumors about? Like her last memory before death, Shane's angry face flashed before the princess's eyes. What nonsense, she can't be a princess. With a slightly trembling voice, she began to make up excuses. The princess was much more beautiful and more modest than the rumors about her. She was ready to tear her hair out, but the king, thank God, believed her. He raised his tired eyes to her, asking if she had any desire. Etina's eyes widened in surprise at why the king had suddenly started talking about this topic. He leaned forward with interest. She had saved him twice already, and even now she spends her time on him to help him. He smiled, turning on all his charm. Demons must return the favor. So if she wants something, he will try to fulfill it. She mentally felt sorry for him. He shouldn't have asked that. But on the other hand, she wouldn't miss this opportunity. Well, that's too obvious. Slowly moving closer, she knelt down in front of him, so that she was face to face with him. Squeezing his shoulders, she spoke passionately of her desire to do something to the king. After some time, her cries of delight could be heard throughout the market. So this is what the demon market looks like. It's her first time here, but it's so amazing. However, there was something familiar about him. He was not much different from a human one. The demon king kept his puzzled eyes on her the entire time, because her wish was too simple. Edina did not take her languid eyes off him. Now she would say it. Right now, she would just go and say it. She closed her eyes and screamed loudly. She wants him to go on a date with her. The demon king's expression was too funny when he heard her request. She wanted to ask him to marry her, but something stopped her. She mentally squealed, imagining him in a wedding suit. He would look absolutely magnificent. But if he marries her out of simple desire, it will hurt her pride. The king asked uncertainly, "Go for what?" Princess Atina jumped up. Doesn't he know what a date is? His eyes, full of innocence, said it all for him. Atina felt as if she was about to have a stroke of affection. How can the demon king have such a look? Well, a date is when two people hang out together, eat delicious things, have fun, etc., and usually they hold hands on a date. Unfortunately, the demon didn't listen to the last sentence, in which case he knows a couple of interesting places nearby. Who knew he would drag Atina to the market? But the atmosphere is pretty good. A voice came from the side, playfully calling them a great couple. It was an ordinary merchant, inviting them to look at his goods. The others followed suit, inviting people to look at their decorations, wonderful heart-shaped lollipops that are perfect for couples. Etina squeezed the headband, which suspiciously resembled the horns of the demon king. With furious affection, she wanted it. After that, she bargained favorably with the candy seller, and her mood noticeably improved. Walking further along the benches, the princess noticed that the demon had stopped at one of them. She came closer with interest to see what had attracted his attention so much. "What is there?" Continuing to mutter, Atina came closer and faltered. On the shelf stood a small toy that was surprisingly reminiscent of the king himself. He kept denying that he didn't want her until the last moment, until the salesman stopped their bickering. "They seem to like the toy," he chuckled. "But it can't be bought. Can only be obtained if they reach 850 points or more, whether they want to try." The princess's eyes lit up. This is a great opportunity to win the heart of her lover. Just one blow, and she destroyed half of the merchant's shop. But she didn't care at all. The main thing was that she scored the required number of points. She roughly grabbed the toy from the counter and handed it to the king. "Here's a present for him." When he accepted it, his expression was hard to read. Etna glanced at him, laughing awkwardly, while the merchant scolded her for breaking the device. Unfortunately, the princess turned away at the wrong time, never seeing his weak smile. It was time to go back. The princess was a little sorry about it, as she had had a lot of fun. This market was much more interesting than the human one. The king was glad that she liked it. Atina saw for the first time how ordinary demons live in his kingdom. Surprisingly, their life is almost no different from human. Now she understands how poorly humans and demons know each other. It dawned on her that the king had been silent for some time, and she turned around with a smile. waiting to hear his opinion. He was confused as to why she was asking him. The princess explained that this was the point of a date. Both people should have fun. She felt a little sad in her mind, actually. This wasn't the kind of date she was expecting. The king wanted to answer that he liked it too, when a deafening cry was heard behind him. Etna and the ruler of hell simultaneously turned towards the demoness. But when the princess looked closer, her eyebrows rose in surprise. This girl, she is a human being, and she is also holding a child in her arms. Another person, besides the maids, is in the demon kingdom. A couple of demon hunters, in order to instill fear, slowly approached her, reached the kingdom, and also stole things. The girl begged for mercy. Her child was starving, but the demons cut her off. They know that her husband is a demon hunter. The mother screamed that he had abandoned them and that she had nothing to do with it. But the demon didn't want to listen. He reached for the sword. Maybe someone else would listen to her, but he would kill her right here and now. The young girl bowed her head, trembling all over and expecting pain. But it did not come. The hunter's pupils narrowed as another sword came into his path. Atina ordered to stop immediately. The woman had a child in her arms. The demon laughed madly. Another human. Since when did the demon kingdom become a place for humans? Bloodlust welled up in him. Was she ready to fight for her life in the demon kingdom? Atina was more serious than ever. Her firm gaze said everything for her. The demon king stepped forward, barking out an order to stop. With one sharp movement, he tore off his cloak and loudly repeated, "Stop the slaughter!" The king and his maid returned to the castle in a gloomy mood. Princess Atina tried her best to keep quiet. She had already attracted a lot of attention lately. To hell with it all, her indignation and anger were stronger. She stopped abruptly. All this time, the king was on pins and needles. He knew that this conversation would happen. The corners of the girl's lips drooped. Why didn't he stop them from the very beginning? If she hadn't intervened, the woman would have been dead. Why did he connect so late? This was happening in his demon kingdom. The king avoided her gaze. He only came out because she tried to harm the demons. He should protect the demons, not the people. "The dam burst!" Atina screamed. "Is it normal if they just take and kill a person?" His voice became colder. In that case, would she have jumped out and protected the woman if she was a demon? For the same reason that she is on the side of people, he is on the side of demons. He has no need to protect people. Besides, aren't it people who so barbarically exterminate demons? As much as she hated to admit it, Atina knew he was right. She herself killed and called for murder. The people admired her exploits and majestic appearance, calling her the heroine of the kingdom. This also applies to demons who kill people. Each of them is simply defending themselves in this battle. Atina let out a poisonous laugh, not letting him finish. And what about the war that happened 100 years ago? The king involuntarily clenched his teeth. He muttered, barely containing himself. This war was provoked by people, wasn't it? She doesn't even know the backstory of why the demons started the war. It's not funny to listen to her. The princess had never seen the king in such a state before, and she involuntarily took a step back. She wanted to protect her people, but the king did not even give her a chance to speak. At the foot of the mountains, where the demon kingdom was located, poisonous clouds accumulated one after another. Because of these clouds, not a ray of sunlight could pass through the demon kingdom for a long time, so they could only grow a limited amount of crops, and there was not always enough food. And so the demons decided to go to the nearest country where the sun shines, in search of fertile lands. However, the humans felt that they were invading their territory, and for this reason, countless demons were killed. They asked many times to help them dispel this poisonous cloud. Demonic magic and human technology would be enough. The king screamed, spitting, but their requests were ignored time and time again, which is why the war began. Despite the fact that their hatred was so deep, he exhaled loudly, cutting himself off. A king who walks with a man without honor and misunderstanding, that is what caused his appearance there. However, instead of gratitude, Atina dared to try to convince him that trusting her was a mistake. The girl felt as if she had been given a sharp slap in the face. Was it a deliberate plan that she saved his life? She wants to gain his trust and hand the demon kingdom over to the humans. In that case, there was no need for them to have these meaningless conversations anymore. His voice echoed in her head. The princess was beside herself with anger, not noticing how the handle of the broom cracked in her hands. The other maids whispered worriedly that something seemed to have happened to this man today. Etna smashed everything that came into her hands. The maids sighed desperately. They had only just washed all the dishes and put them away, and also finished washing the clothes. How cruel, and why did they even work? One of the maids squealed in fear when she saw a cockroach on the floor. It seemed that it was her mistake. Etina turned towards the sound. The girl continued to stand in place, covering her mouth with a trembling hand. The princess grinned. This cockroach reminded her of someone. She trampled and trampled him, releasing all her fury. The demoness felt that it was time to intervene. She should go and rest. The princess headed to her room in a frustrated state, continuing to replay the recent dialogue in her head. For the first time, she felt so terrible, as if there was an open wound on her heart. Trusting her was a mistake, echoed in her head. She had no idea that just one phrase and someone's retreating silhouette could cause so much pain. A hand fell on her shoulder. The princess was so absorbed in her own experiences that she did not hear someone approaching. She turned slowly, preparing to punch the insolent man, but his face was so ugly that she involuntarily retreated. The hand itself was ready to strike. It swung. But this impudent demon, it seems, was not so stupid. He managed to dodge. If he managed to dodge her blow, he's definitely not a demon, which is what he is. Shane smiled sadly. He had no choice but to avoid her fists. After all, he ran into them so many times. Princess Etina never thought she would be so happy to hear that voice. Shane took off his ugly glasses and smiled tenderly at her, asking how she was doing. When asked what he was doing here, the advisor answered mysteriously, "But she doesn't know." Wiping away his tears, Shane began to complain that he had to live in this cold, lonely world, missing their kingdom. He can only come here in disguise, because he is from the human delegation and is under strict surveillance. While Etina listened to him with a puzzled expression, her friend beamed. He was truly very touched. While he was gone, she hadn't caused any problems or done anything weird, and he thought that in less than a day, everyone here would be in an uproar. Shane had no idea that she had grown up so quickly. After hesitating a bit, the princess told the latest events of these days. Shane's scream echoed throughout the castle. She saved the Demon King's life twice, helps him deal with his insomnia, and they even went on a date. What did he hope for? She can't sit like a mouse. What will she do if the demons find out who she is? Shane's eyes widened when the princess reported that the king had thrown her out. Stuttering, he began to ask a bunch of questions, but the girl abruptly cut him off. He has to tell her if it's true that humans make life difficult for demons. What she believed all this time, that demons started a war on the territory of their kingdom, it was a lie. Shane instantly became serious. They shouldn't talk about this here. The mysterious figure, watching from afar, saw the girl wave her hand, inviting him into her room. The unknown demon was torn between reporting this or following them. Night fell, and for the first time, the king felt as if it seemed deafeningly quiet to him. He tried to distract himself, decided to do his own thing, but he felt lonely. Everything seemed to be falling out of my hands, and insomnia was making itself felt. Trying to suppress his irritation, he took a deep breath and closed his eyes. He burned his own bed with a dissatisfied look, wondering why he didn't want to sleep. And he knew the answer to this question perfectly well, but he absolutely did not want to accept it. The walking solution to the problem flashed before him like a bright head throughout the day, but he still refused it out of his own pride. No matter how much the king resisted, his consciousness kept throwing up more and more memories of Etten. Expressive eyes, a bright smile, a loud but nevertheless pleasant voice that was interested in his opinion. Indeed, the person who helped him fall asleep was she. Why did everything suddenly become so complicated? The king went out onto the balcony, wanting to clear his thoughts. Below, he saw a familiar figure, moving forward with a funny gait somewhere among the trees. For a moment, he thought he was just wishful thinking. He looked closer. Her blonde hair was fluttering in the wind. It really was Etina. But why was she heading towards the forest so late at night? Shane didn't know all the details. But there must be a reason why the kingdom refused to help the demons. Everyone just has their own point of view. The advisor lowered his voice. He had something to tell her. A princess should not be swayed by other people's statements, but rather believe in what she can see with her own eyes. Etna remembered the words of that demon exactly. He shouted with hatred that the woman's husband was a demon hunter. A demon hunter. She had never heard of such a thing. The girl doesn't even know how deep the conflict between humans and demons is. So, like Shane said, she has to see it with her own eyes. She had already lost track of time as she continued to move deeper into the forest. Somewhere among the trees, in the forest, An old, dilapidated house had stood for a long time. There was not a soul around him until two men showed up. The merchant began to paint it in all colors. The gentleman will be amazed by the variety, thanks to a hunter named Ogbur. Not a single demon remained in these areas. The gentleman rubbed his hands greedily. The more he listened to him, the more curious he became. He had great hopes. Opening the creaky door, the merchant grinned. He can assure you, he will definitely be satisfied. Suddenly, the gentleman behind him lost his balance and fell to the ground as if he had been shot. The merchant trembled as he was kicked into the wall and had sword blades pressed to his neck. Etna ordered, in a demanding voice, to open the door to the basement. After the merchant had done as she had ordered, she knocked him out with one blow of her elbow to the back of the head. With an unpleasant feeling, the girl took the torch from the wall and took a deep breath, gathering her courage. When she got down, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Rows and endless rows of cells, and someone was sitting in them. They were demons, emaciated, in torn clothes, more like rags. How could this happen? The princess froze in place, speechless. She had absolutely no idea what she should do in this situation. The demons imprisoned in the cages woke up and screamed in horror when they saw the man. As Atina grabbed the bars of the cage, they trembled, begging her for mercy. He told her that all demons are terrible, so she must protect people and destroy demons. What the hell? Her whole life, her purpose and her heroism, it was all a lie. What was she doing all this for? Suddenly, in addition to her heavy breathing, the princess heard the muffled voices of others. It looks like an intruder has broken in. We need to make sure the slaves don't escape. Filled with rage and shame, Atina wanted to take revenge. It gave her goosebumps when a familiar voice asked her with a chuckle if she could kill them. These are people. Atina turned around. The Demon King stood in front of her. He looked at her searchingly to see if she would raise her hand. Atina felt confused and humiliated as to why he was here. The guards' cries grew louder and closer, and the princess was torn between despair and doubt. Anger took over, and her teeth ground together. She took a sharp step forward when a leather-gloved hand stopped her. The Demon King pulled Atina towards him, hiding her behind his cloak. Their figures dissolved into thin air, leaving only the torch that had fallen from her hand on the damp ground. The guards looked around fearfully, but there was no one here. However, the king and princess still remained in the basement, just invisible to the common man's eye. Etna felt like she was broken into 1,000 pieces and a single lump of nerves at the same time. Regret and anger still raged in her heart. However, this was the first time she was so close to the king, the first time she felt the warmth of his body. Fighting her embarrassment, she raised an enchanted gaze to the king, in which a question was read. The guard's gaze fell on the torch that continued to burn, lying on the ground. He definitely heard some sounds, and he raised it with disbelief in his voice. The other guard was less patient. He knocked aggressively on the bars of the cage. The demons curled into a trembling ball. The slaves must immediately tell what happened here, what those sounds were. Etna trembled with rage in the arms of the Demon King as the vile guard continued to vent his anger on the prisoners. Her teeth gritted as she muttered through them, "These scum!" In an attempt to support her, the ruler of hell lightly squeezed her hand, and the princess involuntarily shuddered. Through the thin fabric of the glove, she felt the warmth of his hand, and Atina's heart began to beat faster. Slowly, the Demon King placed her fingers on his soft lips and hissed, signaling her to be quiet. A complete void formed in the princess's head. She completely forgot where she was and who she was. At the same time, the Demon King did not hesitate. He concentrated his power and directed the spell towards the guards. The two men noticed too late that they were surrounded by a suspicious fog. Some gaseous substance surrounded them, cutting off their oxygen supply. The guards fought with all their might, but the king's spell was stronger. A couple of minutes later, the men collapsed on the floor, rolling their eyes. Etna looked at the king in disbelief. He did not kill these men. The spell exhausted the demon, and the king approached the bars on weak legs. His subjects couldn't believe their eyes. This was truly the king. They were not mistaken. His voice trembled. He came to save them, but he had no idea that they were being held in such a place. It was only thanks to this girl, he nodded towards Atina, that he was able to rescue them. Tears of relief welled up in the eyes of the enslaved, and they threw themselves at the feet of their master, thanking him. The king has long suffered from assassination attempts, and unlike the princess, who worries that he is an unreliable king, he has undoubtedly won the trust of the people. All this time they were humiliated by people, so she understands their hatred. However, despite the fact that the king did not kill these people, they do not demand their death. The wariness towards Atina disappeared after the king told about her. A slight pang of envy pierced the princess's heart. A ruler who is trusted. The girl easily picked up the unconscious guard's body and carefully searched his pockets. Having attracted the attention of the demon king, Atina threw him the keys to the cells. It may still be dangerous here, and the victims should be taken to a calmer place as soon as possible. The king opened his mouth in confusion. Isn't she coming? Atina chuckled carelessly and kicked the unconscious guard. No, she still had something to do. The king is already confused in his feelings towards this strange girl. She knows how to surprise. She came here with an offering, as a servant, and was able to look him straight in the eyes. Just look at the time she knocked the poisoned soup out from under his nose. She even visited his chambers, which not everyone can do. She said that she would help him get rid of insomnia, and out of the blue she made him train. And now she was going to be left alone in such a dangerous place. Atina turned away in embarrassment. It seems that the person who was following her can't tell her about such things, and she needs to check something. The king's words left her confused. The girl was confused as to what she had believed in until now. And the most important thing is that there is truth. But now, seeing what he does, she begins to understand a little. What is now much more important than the truth is what she is going to believe from this moment on, and what path she will take. The king did not take his all-consuming gaze off her. He was overcome by some previously unfamiliar but pleasant feeling. Atina smiled at him radiantly, confessing that she wanted to become like him. And for this, she needs to stay here. The demon listened to her silently. He understood that he was not in a position to control her or dictate anything. But still, he couldn't leave so easily. She had to promise him something. He came too close, marveling at himself. She should return safe and sound. Princess Atina made no secret of how much she enjoyed his touch. She smiled tenderly and sealed the promise with her little fingers. The way promises are made in the human world. This means that she will definitely keep her promise and will never die. Soon after their separation, her heavy footsteps echoed in the underground corridors. The guards guarding the passage tensed and grabbed their swords. What was that sound? A slender female silhouette landed silently behind them. The princess managed to knock out both men with just one sharp blow. Demon hunter Rick Ogber is her target for today. They kidnap demons on the outskirts of the kingdom and then sell them to some people. Those who fall into their hands become slaves, and then they are simply disposed of. There are definitely some demons who commit crimes against humans, but that's the demon king's problem, and she must take care of the problems associated with her people. The girl swung open the front doors with a bang, declaring herself. But the man, sitting with his back to the entrance, did not react at all to her appearance. A cold-blooded chuckle rang out. It seemed he had guests, which brought her here so late at night. Atina frowned. Let him not pretend that he didn't understand. He had probably already received the report. She was the one who attacked the warehouse with the imprisoned demons. The man's voice was filled with fierce condemnation and sarcasm, somehow inhuman. Why was she on the side of the demons? Hunter Ogber chuckled because she was in love with the king. The hunter's head fell down unnaturally sharply. She must understand how she would disappoint people. A princess from the human kingdom fell in love with the demon king and sided with them. Atina lost her temper. She abruptly pulled the chair towards herself. How does he know about this? With her muffled scream, her limp body collapsed to the floor. Ogber had long been dead. A familiar female silhouette emerged from behind the curtain, confessing that she had killed him with her own hands. Besides, she knows how to transform her voice, and it wasn't that easy to imitate the old man's voice. The mysterious woman laughed, enjoying the situation and the princess's tension. By the way, she and Princess Atina haven't seen each other for a long time. The girl froze in surprise, fighting the desire to immediately kill the spy. Gradually, she remembered that the woman standing in front of her was definitely in the Demon King's chambers. The demoness had been watching the princess all this time. The ability to hide from prying eyes was another of her abilities. She certainly understands that the princess is quite strong, but she did not expect that Atina would turn out to be that very princess. If Atina hadn't spoken to her subordinate in the middle of the castle, the demoness wouldn't have realized who she really was. So that means she heard their conversation with Shane. The spy rolled her eyes. Wasn't it obvious? It seems like she's getting closer and closer to the Demon King, She's going out to kill him. She needs to deal with Athena first. Otherwise, she'll just keep getting in the way. The demoness smiled carnivorously, and today was that day. She doesn't know if the princess is as strong as the rumors say, but they're definitely going to have some fun today. Steel flashed in the semi-darkness, and the demoness went on the attack. Two double-edged swords were rapidly approaching her, but Athena did not move at all. Her gaze was empty and desperate. She had only one question. Of course, the demoness's blades were no obstacle to her. She destroyed them with a wave of one hand. The demoness's eyes widened in shock as her weapon shattered into pieces. Why does she hate the Demon King so much? Still confused, the demoness landed awkwardly, twisting her leg and falling to the floor. Her pupils narrowed to the size of pins, quivering with disbelief. Princess, is she really that strong? If she really teamed up with the Demon King, they wouldn't have a chance to win. The demoness answered her question in a colorless voice. The Demon King would never become a good ruler. Being the way he is, he will never stain his hands with blood. We only obeyed the powerful Demon King, who shows no mercy to humans. Her voice trembled with rage. People will pay for their sins with their lives. The demoness suddenly pulled a dagger from the folds of her clothes. She too will die. There was a muffled wheeze, and drops of blood began to pound the floor like a quick trill. Princess Athena did not know what harm people had done to her. She will apologize for them. She had no idea that something like this was happening. However, she gripped the blade tighter, which drove it deeper into her palm. She can't die. After all, she had already made a promise. Her lips themselves stretched into a smile. The demoness's lips twitched nervously, and she unclenched the handle of her dagger. The blade rolled across the parquet. Even if she couldn't kill the princess, she will not allow herself to die at the hands of a man. The demoness was not afraid. Her will would definitely be fulfilled by her comrades or master. The words of her opponent made it clear to Athena that she was about to do something terrible. The demoness opened her mouth wide, revealing sharp teeth, and bit into the poison capsule. At least that's what she thought. But Athena's fingers stood in her way. Despite the intense pain, Athena grabbed her jaw with all her might. Her face darkened. Whose will was she fulfilling? The demoness opened her mouth, trying to get rid of her, but the princess clung to her tightly. She won't let her do it herself. The girl pushed her away in disgust. If she wanted to kill herself so much, let her do it alone. The girl moved her bloody hand back so that her opponent would not see her trembling. Feeling ashamed and humiliated, the demoness closed her eyes and remained sitting on the floor. So if she's not going to kill herself, then she should just wait a little longer. Then she will see how Princess Athena can change the world. The demoness's eyes widened. The princess's smile was so open and kind, her words were definitely not a lie. Before the woman had time to come to her senses, the princess's figure had dissolved into the damp night air. After wandering around the forest for a while, Princess Athena finally returned to the demon castle. However, her return did not go unnoticed. Someone was waiting for her. The Demon King's voice sounded muffled and unfamiliar for some reason. She returned. The girl hesitated awkwardly. It turned out that he had been waiting for her all this time. Athena smiled, spreading her arms out to the sides. She kept her promise and returned alive. However, the king was displeased, his brows furrowed, because he smelled blood. He gently took her hand and brought it closer to take a closer look. Deep teeth marks formed a clear semicircle on her fingers. Etna's lips parted in surprise, enjoying the attention she was receiving. The king, frowning his thin eyebrows, looked so sensual and desirable. A pleasant warmth swept over her from head to toe, and she smiled brightly at him. It seems she'd better return to her kingdom. As sad as it made her feel, it was the right decision. After listening to him and seeing everything with her own eyes, she realized that she needed to change a lot. Etna realized that she had misspoken and awkwardly scratched the back of her head. He probably doesn't understand what some maid is capable of, but maybe she can do something. It seemed that Athena had already forgotten that it was given to him as a sign of respect. This means that the king stroked her bloody fingers, that she belongs to him. She has no right to freedom. Athena moved closer. It finally happened. Would he try to stop her? The king did not take his hungry eyes off her. No. But he has conditions. She had to listen carefully. He leaned closer and whispered something in her ear. For a moment, Princess Athena forgot how to breathe. Her face instantly turned crimson at what he just said. As the guards opened the front doors, the music coming from behind them grew louder. Many ladies and gentlemen from different classes and cities arrived at the ball. The atmosphere in the hall was magical. People were chatting with smiles, clinking glasses and drinking. The soothing trill of the cello made its contribution, and the guests could not resist and began to dance. There were many couples circling the room, but Shane didn't see any familiar faces. He looked around in confusion, trying to figure out where the princess was. The advisor awkwardly turned to the waiter and asked what the celebration was in honor of. The demon gasped. How could he not know? This was the annual royal ball, an important event where all the high-ranking persons of their kingdom gathered. Smiling slyly, the waiter whispered furtively, "But today is a special day." Unlike last year, the demon started, but the sound of the fanfare interrupted him. His eyes lit up, and he continued, "The Demon King will come with a lady." Shane's mouth dropped open in surprise, wondering how Princess Atina would react to this. The balcony doors swung open, and the Demon King stepped out onto the second-floor portico. He looked around at his subjects with a concentrated gaze, as if his eyes were looking for someone in particular. Shane felt that he shared the emotions of the ladies screaming next to him. The king. He hadn't seen him for a long time. He really had the qualities of a good ruler. And if you look at how happy his servants are to see him, but it seems that all the joy is only because he is beautiful. How unfair this world is. The advisor felt someone burning his back with a frosty gaze. He turned around. Despite the respect and trust of their people, there will always be enemies among them. The king spread his arms wide. Maybe it was an annual event and nothing special, but he was still glad that his subjects had taken the time to attend. At the end of the event, he will make an important announcement, and he hopes that no one leaves before the evening is over. The demons whispered in surprise, "What an important announcement!" And before it began, the king did not have time to finish his sentence, as he was interrupted by the sound of the doors opening. It felt like there was a fight going on behind the doors. Someone was being stopped, warning her that it was not the right time yet, and she shouldn't go in there. Shane's heart sank when he realized that one of the participants in the fight was Tina. He grimaced, of course. Nothing in this world can go smoothly. The doors swung open with a loud noise, and in the middle of the opening stood a tall figure, radiating an aura of majesty. The girl moved into the hall, rustling her multi-layered skirts. The beads on her neck glittered and reflected the flames of hundreds of candles. The Demon King's eyes widened, and he forgot how to breathe for a moment. Feeling slightly embarrassed, Princess Atina met his gaze and awkwardly tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Wanting to quickly reunite with his guest, the Demon King headed towards her. Many of the subjects watched his figure with shocked eyes. Between these two, the Demon King stopped in front of the princess and helpfully extended his hand to her. Slightly nervous, Princess Atina placed her hand in his and squeezed it slightly. As the couple moved arm in arm into the room, it dawned on Shane. So it turns out that the king's lady is the princess, damn it. The princess. She got herself into something again. But the advisor wiped away his sensual tears. For the first time, he saw her so beautiful and elegant, how she was able to transform so quickly. Now he had seen everything. Now he could die. The advisor buckled like a thin tree in the wind. Meanwhile, Atina enjoyed everyone's attention. All her subjects were looking at her. The king quietly reassured her. They needed time. She was the first one he brought to this event. This was the very condition that the king demanded in exchange for her freedom. The annual event, the Royal Ball, is coming soon. If Atina participates in it as his partner, he will consider her request. The girl was looked at with unkind glances. Who was she? Why did a person come here as the king's partner? The king sighed heavily. His subjects also had a warning towards the people. However, after meeting her, his opinion changed. That's why he asked Atina to come here with him to the ball. He wants others to dispel their prejudices, too. Princess Atina smiled kindly. Okay, she would take care of it. The evening's leading couple danced and enjoyed each other's company. The king felt at peace. That thin arm that could take down a dozen soldiers with one swing now lay softly in his hand. And this beautiful, chiseled figure, a killing machine, smoothly followed him in the dance. Roughly opening the king's mouth, Princess Atina forcefully shoved the delicacy in there. But the main thing is that she did it with care. The girl tried her best to behave decently throughout the evening and enjoyed the performance. She shared the king's double winnings, which pleased her greatly, but not the other ladies, who wanted the same. Finally alone, Atina exhaled loudly. And he has to hold such an event every year. It's not easy being a king. When asked if there were no similar celebrations in her kingdom, Atina admitted that she always ran away from them. A moment later, the girl realized that she had let it slip, and in a choked voice, she explained that she had meant a vacation. The king thought, apparently, their maids can take vacation whenever they want. In this regard, their kingdom is more progressive. Fortunately for the princess, the awkward atmosphere was broken by a maid who entered with drinks. The demon handed her a drink. It was made from an ingredient called hyax, a rare stone that increases magical power. As the demon king, he has to drink it at all events, including this one. Would the young lady mind sharing this burden with him? Etna looked at the glass with interest. This way and that. She doesn't use magic. Does she need to drink it? While it wasn't bad for the last drink she had in his kingdom, they clinked glasses. The king watched with an attentive gaze as his guest drank the contents of the glass. He closed his eyes and followed her example. She had done a lot today. She was probably tired. But the princess assured him otherwise. She had had quite a lot of fun today. By the way, what is the important announcement he wants to make? At that moment, the girl felt strange. The king seemed to answer her something, but the noise in her ears was stronger. The surrounding colors began to blur and fade, and the princess felt like she was losing consciousness. A deafening scream echoed throughout the castle as the guards burst inside with a roar. Sir Daigle grinned, surrounded by his soldiers. He smiled greedily. His plan had finally come true. The king grabbed Atina, who was barely able to stand on her feet. And what was going on? The glass shattered with a deafening sound, spilling all its contents. This is treason. Not believing his ears, the king ordered them to stop in a furious tone. But the demon only laughed. He would have to leave the throne and say goodbye to life. The demons whispered in panic. The king's right hand in betrayal. What was happening? Daigle slowly pulled his sword out of its sheath and cleared his throat, attracting everyone's attention. Just a moment. Today he will turn the king over and take his place. The demon king is in cahoots with his enemies and is trying to hand over the demon kingdom to humans. But the king's subjects would not tolerate what Sir Daigle was saying. It was just nonsense. The king would never do such a thing. The demon laughed. That was nonsense, then. He sent his sword flying towards the king, whom Atina reflexively covered with herself. Let him explain it. The girl managed to dodge, but the sharp weapon was able to tear the layers of her dress. Metal flashed among the torn rags. The demons reeled in horror when they recognized the holy sword. That's right. This is the same holy sword that took the life of the previous demon king during the war 100 years ago, and currently, only one person has the right to wield it. And this is the princess of the kingdom of Nyande. With a nasty grin, Daigle raised his eyes to her. The princess felt horror seize her. She could hardly think under the influence of the poison, but her silence was as eloquent as if she had answered, and shocked gasps were heard throughout the room. The demon king's pupils narrowed to the size of pins as he realized who was standing next to him. He asked again with distrust in his voice, hoping for a negative answer, but the effect of the poison was too strong. The princess could barely string 2 words together. She's not feeling well. They must have added something to their drinks. If this is so, then most likely the king is no better. The demon continued to add fuel to the fire. The king's partner is a human, and even a princess of an enemy kingdom. There is no excuse for this. From the very beginning, he found it strange. The princess's sudden proposal of marriage, and then this suspicious offering from the people, and even the plan they had been preparing for years, the king put aside. Still unsteady, Atina asked again what the plan was. Daigle laughed. That was right, their plan. War with the human world. Atina's heart was beating so fast that it felt like it was about to burst. She looked up at the king in shock. Was he really going to start a war with her kingdom? Daigle continued to call on the people. They no longer need to endure this. It is time to overthrow the traitor and fulfill their cherished desire. The king's former right hand pointed his sword at him. To kill him, and the guards scattered. With just one swing of the sword, the merry ball turned into a bloodbath, and the demons headed towards the exit in horror. Fortunately, there were still guards loyal to the king, and they surrounded him, putting up a defense. The princess stood in place, forcing herself to come to her senses. Her head was completely out of order. They found out she was a princess. They rebelled, and the demon king was planning a war with humans. What should she do? The poison dulled the princess's sense of touch, and she did not feel the sword hanging over her head at all. Suddenly, someone's strong hand pushed her aside, and a groan escaped Atina's lips. With the last of his strength, the demon king formed a magical shield, deflecting the sword strike. With all the strength he had left, he pushed the soldier and he rolled down the stairs. Despite her, he barked in a rough voice towards the Athena, causing her to freeze. She's strong, so it's time for her to run. She can handle it. The princess did not agree with the king's arguments, but he interrupted her. He was their target, not her. Despite the storm of feelings raging in the king's chest, he was not going to turn away from her. Just as Athena had changed her mind, he too had realized something for himself. It was true that he was planning to start a war. However, after today's celebration, he wanted to talk to her. He sincerely wanted to establish friendly relations with the human world. The princess opened her mouth in shock, not knowing what to say. There was a scream from the side. Someone squeezed her hand. It was Shane. The king walked forward with an unsteady gait. Let them go, he would hold them back. Shane pulled the princess along with all his might as she screamed the king's name. The pair of friends grouped together and jumped out of the window. Athena landed awkwardly, falling on her side, and Shane cried out in excitement and caught her. Her condition, she needs to come to her senses. They need to escape right now. But the guards were already approaching with swords at the ready. They were there to detain them. The entire castle area is already surrounded. They have nowhere to run. Shane awkwardly drew his sword and held it out in front of him. Ordering the princess to leave, he would deal with them. Etna grabbed him. What was he carrying? He couldn't even hold a sword in his hands properly. The advisor's voice trembled. He was ready to beg, because only she could resolve the situation. Therefore, she must leave. And when her strength is restored, she will definitely return. Her life, she had promised someone that she would remain unharmed. With bitterness in her soul, the girl took off her shoes, preparing to escape. She turned to look at Shane one last time. He had to hold on. In the forest, she screamed, she will definitely return. The poison was making itself felt. Athena's run was not so easy. Gradually, her breathing became only heavier. Everything around was floating, making it difficult to navigate in space. A cold sweat ran through the princess. She had to save him. She can't fall. Athena tried her best to keep her eyes open, but everything around her went dark. The weakened body of the princess, who had lost consciousness, lay sprawled on the cold and damp ground. Quiet footsteps approached, and someone stopped right in front of her. With the last of her strength, the princess opened her eyes. They looked with the gaze of a hunted animal. Unfortunately, her body did not obey, and the blade of a dagger flashed in the darkness. The girl tried to rise with all her might as the dagger was raised above her head, but the body became numb. Athena closed her eyes with regret, preparing for death. When the girl woke up, her breathing was heavy. Athena did not understand where she was. Hearing the noise, the demoness turned around. The small cuts and abrasions on her body did not escape Athena's eyes. The princess was still coming to her senses. She was trying to figure out who was in front of her and where she was. It seems like she felt better. Could it be that the demoness helped her? It was a paralyzing drink. Not particularly harmful to the body, but it definitely paralyzes for a couple of hours. It's surprising that she was able to get here at all. Now that the demoness has used the antidote, the princess should feel better. That's why she's so smart. Etna looked at her strangely. Why did she save her? She wanted to kill her and the king. The demoness growled, but did she save her? She can't cope with it, it's so hard. The princess's words destroyed her to the ground and changed her forever. With disgust and embarrassment, the demoness admitted that she had no choice but to fall in love with her. The princess opened her mouth in surprise, spilling all the antidote. What does that mean? But still, Athena looked at her with eyes full of gratitude. The demoness was embarrassed. She was not yet completely on her side. Half an hour has passed since the princess fainted. The king is still alive, but the battle is not over yet, and she will never share important information with the princess for free. Etna did not take this tirade seriously. By the way, the demoness said that she had a master, the one who raised the rebellion. Isn't it a betrayal that she saved the princess? For a moment, the woman's face twisted. But who cares? He is no longer her master. It seems that Athena began to guess where the abrasions came from. Gritting her teeth, she said quietly, Sir Deagle was her benefactor. In her youth, she was kidnapped by humans and lived in slavery. Now she doesn't really want to remember those terrible days. Sir Deagle saved her then, and from that day on, she decided to dedicate her life to him. It was hard for her to see Deagle filled with hatred for the people who had killed his family in the war years ago. The demoness was sure that she had to take revenge on them. For this reason, she thought that she was not afraid of death and murder. However, reality was at odds with her dreams. and she became dejected and turned away. In the end, she couldn't kill either the princess or the king. Isn't it obvious that incompetent servants are eliminated? So the demoness decided to escape and save her life, because she also wants a happy ending. The image of Athena, like a goddess bathing in the moonlight and promising change, involuntarily appeared before her eyes every time. The girl could no longer remain idle. She rose to her feet. The princess is glad that the demoness did not give up and continues to live, and also saved her life. Therefore, she will definitely change this world. Finally, confidence and strength have returned to her body. The demoness was amazed at such a quick recovery. Would she really return to her kingdom? After rummaging through her skirts, the princess pulled out the sacred sword. No, to the demon kingdom. Has she gone mad? War is about to start. Shouldn't she, as a princess, return and defend her kingdom? It is for this reason that Athena will return to the demon king's castle. In order to save her kingdom, she must first prevent the war from starting. The demoness watched her actions in amazement. Was she really going to do this alone? True, Princess Athena shrugged her shoulders. She said that she would change this world. With an unsteady gait, the princess headed towards the forest. The demoness smiled bitterly. She really was crazy. Athena heard strange clapping sounds and saw a shadow approaching her. She flinched as well-groomed but strong hands grabbed her under the arms, and her feet lifted off the ground. The demoness flapped her wings, raising a new wave of wind. She would throw her up. It would be faster. Athena was quite surprised, and when she managed to change her mind, but she was still glad to have such support. Even from afar, one could see that the demon king's castle was surrounded by a gloomy aura, and screams were heard from all around. The smell of blood was everywhere. The clanging of metal was unbearable. The commander-in-chief gave the order to stop the rebels and find the king. They must protect him. But it was too late. Dagal had achieved his goal. It's so unfortunate for a loyal subordinate, isn't it? But now he was finished. The pitiful and disfigured appearance of the king gave him indescribable satisfaction. By the way, he was surprised. He knew that he had some resistance to poisons, but he didn't think that he wouldn't take the king at all. Dagal continued to rant, but the demon king was running out of patience and abruptly cut him off. The king knows his whole story. He knows that Hegel lost 2 daughters and his wife in the war, and he understands his anger. In that war, he also experienced the bitterness of losing his father. However, retribution should not be driven by anger. He himself had recently realized this. As the king spoke, his breathing became increasingly heavy. The corners of Hegel's lips turned down. He looked even older. That's how the king thinks it's his mistake. The demon suddenly lunged forward and grabbed the king by the hair before he could start talking such nonsense that it would be worth cutting out his tongue. Who would let him do that? A mocking girl's voice rang out. This distracted Hegel just in time. A little more, and the king's throat would have been cut. Etna landed on the grass with a crash and dust. Rubbing his only eye, the demon coughed. What kind of idiot is he? The king also squinted with interest, trying to discern in the clouds of dust the impudent fellow who had decided to interfere with them. His eyes widened as the clouds of dust parted, revealing a familiar figure. Of course, it was a princess, although now she looked more like a savage, in such an unsightly form. Mischievous sparkles danced in her eyes. Did the demons really think they could handle her? There was another person hiding in a more or less quiet corner of the castle. It was none other than Shane, his breathing heavy and his body covered in small abrasions. The advisor wiped the sweat from his forehead. It seemed he had managed to distract them. He looked out from around the corner timidly. The princess must be safe now. His heart sank into his heels when he noticed a terrible figure behind him. Jumping up sharply like a frightened rabbit, he held out his sword in front of him. She is someone else. But the demoness standing in front of him began to calm him down, which surprised Shane even more. Besides, this suspicious woman from somewhere else knew his name. She came to tell him that everything was okay with the princess. Shane breathed a sigh of relief, but he didn't let go of the sword until she found out where it was. The demoness explained that she could fly, and she noticed him from the sky. He stood completely alone, surrounded by soldiers. Playing with his sword and stretching out his words, he managed to intimidate the soldiers, and they took a frightened step back. Taking advantage of the situation, the advisor jumped back sharply and ran away, tail between his legs. Shane had no choice but to awkwardly shift around, the princess's evil laughter ringing in his ears. All he knew how to do was run away. The demoness knows who is causing all this. But we need to get away from here. The enemies will soon get here too. The surroundings of the castle are already under their control. But despite these words, the advisor's gaze was full of hope. It was okay. The princess would soon sort out this problem. Daigle clicked his tongue in displeasure. Damn, she's so tenacious. Someone helped her, and that's how she managed to survive. She poured the antidote given to her by the demoness into the king's parched throat. It seems Daigle knew who it was. Jula. This stupid creature went over to the side of people. Atina frowned and looked at him with a look filled with contempt. Did he really think that Julu was stupid? If he knew how she hated people and how faithful she was to him, he should know this better than she. However, the demoness changed her mind. Shouldn't her choice be respected? Even if their rebellion is successful, Daigle will continue to use his subordinates. He would never become a good ruler. Atina's voice trembled with anger. Daigle laughed. He was not going to attach any importance to the princess's words. She was just a fry in his path. How much she talks. The demon waved his hand, ordering the guards to kill her. Atina froze in a fighting stance, as if she couldn't handle several soldiers. The demons ran towards her, armed with swords, while she prepared to fight with her bare hands. A swing of the sword, Atina crouched, dodging. With another swing, the princess hit the guard back, and he growled in pain. Dodging another soldier's attack, Princess Atina knocked the other down and knocked the sword out of his hand. Using the grab technique, she knocked out another soldier as well. But that was not the end. There were 3 more on the way. Ahead of them, Atina was the first to attack. Grabbing Demon by the scruff of the neck, she threw him over herself. The soldier landed awkwardly, knocking down his partner, leaving only one left. While the demon was distracted, the princess took the opportunity to aim her fist at him. There was a crunch. The guard's jaw was broken, and he buried his face in the ground. Meanwhile, Princess Atina wasn't even out of breath next. Daigle stretched his lips into a predatory grin and applauded. And the princess lived up to the rumors about herself. With cold fury, he ordered his subordinates to retreat back. He himself would take her life. The Demon King's voice sounded hoarse and muffled. Now was definitely not the time to be stupid. Daigle is strong. He took part in the war 100 years ago. If he had not left the battlefield due to the misfortune that befell his family, he could certainly have fought on par with the knight Arthur. Princess Atina didn't let his arguments get to her ears. She was worried about something else. It would turn out that the king was worried about her. She tried to hide it, but her voice wavered against her will. Shouldn't he be angry with her? It's all because of her. If it weren't for her, they wouldn't have thought that the king was in cahoots with the people. The king reluctantly admitted that from the first day he was interested in what kind of person she was. The atrocities that people committed in the past were in the past. She herself understood this. However, the time spent with her changed him. Every second spent together. The princess was sincere. Knowing that Atina was not lying, he learned a lot from her. Despite his grave condition, the Demon King found the strength to stretch his dry lips into a smile. The princess's jaw dropped. The king smiled, looked at her with his beautiful eyes, and smiled at her. She ran closer and began to lament with fervor. Initially, he liked the king because of his appearance, but now, Daigle had no intention of watching this bald melodrama. With one swing of his weapon, he cut off her speech. A dagger flew towards the king, and the princess's heart sank with fear. But it seemed that Daigle had no intention of killing him like that. For now, it was just a warning. The demon exhaled in irritation. That's it, we've had enough fun. And the princess shouldn't be too presumptuous. Is she really naive to think that everything will end as soon as she deals with him? The deep-rooted hatred towards humans lives in this kingdom, and someone will continue to try to take the king's life. Everything inside Daigle was seething with rage. It wouldn't end if he died. As much as the princess didn't want to admit it, she knew the demon was right. Rising up on weak legs, the king confirmed her thoughts out loud. Etna must leave this. He will take everything upon himself. She has been helping him all this time. Now it is the king's turn to deal with this problem. He also wished she would stay behind. But his aura of a majestic hero didn't last long when the girl tugged at his cloak and called him a fool. Now it's not just his problem. Her kingdom is involved. He must live. The princess grabbed her sword, preparing for a new round. If he lives, the real problem will be solved. The power of the sword resonated with the princess's soul, and she had never felt so renewed. When she first met him in battle, the Demon King seemed very strong to her. That is why she fell in love with him at first sight. Plus, of course, with the beauty of his face, the king tactfully remained silent. As it turned out, in life he was much weaker than she thought. The king choked. He may not be a bad guy, but the princess is glad he's trying to change things. Daigle moved forward rapidly. He could no longer bear to listen to the clemency of these two. The aura of the sacred weapon increasingly exerted pressure on him, but his rage and desire for vengeance were stronger. The king squinted, blinded by the bright light emanating from the princess's figure. He had never seen such power in his life. Smiling brightly, Atina finished her story, and now she was truly in love with him. He is a demon and will live for a very long time. Despair overwhelmed the king's heart. It will take quite a long time. And if the human and demon worlds can't find common ground before she dies, well, she hopes that he can somehow end these senseless wars. For the first time in his life, the king felt fear. He screamed in a breaking voice. He promises that this will happen before her death. He couldn't let her go, not under these circumstances. A holy grace descended from heaven to earth, and the demons in the immediate radius felt weak and dizzy. The king's ears were ringing, but he could still clearly hear the princess's voice. She believes him with all her heart, so she will help him. Daigle refused to believe until the very end that he was giving up his position. The demon resisted as best he could. Princess Atina swung her sword, leaving behind a bright light of pure energy. Daigle couldn't tear his eyes away in admiration. This sword has a terrifying power that he only felt through greed and desire to possess. The glow surrounding the princess's silhouette gradually grew, covering the entire castle area. The hum grew louder. The energy accumulated in one place until it reached its peak, followed by an explosion. The city demons discussed the topic of rebellion for a long time. It seems that General Daigle led an army and attacked the castle, but he was stopped quite quickly. What shocked the citizens most was that the king was safe, but it was a man who saved him. Many could not believe that this person was the princess of the human kingdom. She had entered the king's castle. What nonsense! How could a person do such a thing? The narrator himself did not believe it. But is there even one demon who could use such power? It was the power of her sword. But the princess was a fierce warrior. Why would she help their king? One of the demons shared a rumor. From what he heard, the princess is on the demon's side. She said that she is going to make a truce between the demon and human kingdom. She saved the king more than once. No one was injured or killed by the power of her sacred sword. All the rebels lost consciousness and recently woke up. Would there have been any point in this if the princess had not changed her attitude towards them? It's hard to believe this cruel princess. However, she saved the king's life. We can only judge her by future events. And yet, thanks to her power, their skies became clear, didn't they? The rays of sunshine they had been waiting for so long. The demons enjoyed luxuries they had not been able to afford for centuries. If you think about it, human lands are quite beautiful. The demon king's eyes widened. His first thought was for Princess Atina. Hula came to her senses. He finally woke up. When the king saw her face, he was like a cat whose fur stood on end. The demoness grinned. It seemed she had scared him. This was, of course, her style. The king was still tense, and in a hoarse voice, he asked why she was here. The demoness rolled her eyes. Stop looking at her so warily, she came to convey the princess's words. The king immediately leaned forward with excitement. Tina, she is safe! The king's voice became much sadder when he heard that the princess had returned to her kingdom. His faithful servants begged her to stay, but she left anyway, saying that she had a lot of work to do at home. The king looked down at the floor in disappointment. He wanted to see her so much, but still, he knew what the burden of royal blood was, so he could not blame her for anything. As if reading his thoughts, Jula voiced them. Just like his, Princess Atina asked me to give him something and also to look after him until her return. She promised that she would change this world. She also assured that she would return to the king one day. But if she can't change the world, she can only hope that he can. The king bowed his head, causing his hair to cover his face, making it difficult to understand what he was feeling at the moment. His soul was light. He smiled. She remains crazy until the very end. A year later, Atina sat on the throne, barely able to bear to listen to the knight's stifling report. Almost all the monsters have been cleared out. There will be a report soon. Also, the harvest in the south is expected to exceed the norm this year, blah blah blah. The princess rolled her eyes and pierced Sir Jansen with a searching look, wondering if he was leaving anything out of his report. This year, the harvest is higher than normal. Is it because he plundered the demon lands again? She seems to have repeated more than once not to touch the demon lands under any circumstances. Or maybe she is not speaking a human language. Sir Jansen felt at that moment that he suddenly began to believe in God. Throwing himself at the princess's feet, he began to beat his forehead, apologizing. They will fix everything. When the ministerial meeting ended, Shane did not fail to praise Atina. Everything went smoothly. Thanks to her, the affairs of the kingdom are going well, and His Majesty the King enjoys a peaceful life. The advisor's handkerchief was already wet from these noble tears. He was so touched by how quickly the princess was changing. The girl didn't react to the NR. The construction of the dam on the west coast has been going rather sluggishly for a couple of months now. She should personally see what's going on there. If a tsunami occurs, the area will be dangerous for both humans and demons. Shane's eyebrows rose in concern, wondering if she was taking on too much. Princess Atina frowned. It would be great if she could restore order within the kingdom so that she could begin to deal with the problems of relations with the demon kingdom. In this way, they will be able to make this world more favorable for human existence. Suddenly, guards burst into the hall. It looks like they are in trouble. The demon kingdom's army was approaching their kingdom. The princess felt her heartbeat quicken. She ran out onto the balcony as fast as she could. She didn't believe it until the very end. But there it was. A huge procession was moving across the bridge. Shane stuttered and asked if the Demon King had deceived them. With tension, but at the same time anticipation in her voice, the princess pronounced the king's name. Turning sharply and without explaining anything, she grabbed her skirts and rushed into the depths of the castle. The advisor didn't know what to do. All he could do was follow her. The outer perimeter guards did not know how to react to the approaching demons, whether they were enemies or guests. But guests usually come by invitation. The main question arose. Were the demons really declaring war on them? The princess had tried so hard to establish relations with the demon kingdom. There was a deafening cry. Soldiers to be ready until the princess gives the order. Princess Atina ran past the guards, completely ignoring their questions in panic. The heels clicking on the cobblestones were not at all designed for running, but she didn't care. Pushing off the ground, she made a sharp leap forward. The nearest demon's horse was startled when the princess landed right in front of him with a deafening thud. The entire procession froze, and the princess also froze, awaiting an explanation. She seemed to be extremely greedy, her eyes fixed on the carriage door, expecting to see the king as soon as possible. There was a deep laugh. A velvety voice spoke, and she, as always, was quick, and again he could not find the words. Outwardly, the demon king had not changed. He remained exactly the same, but his eyes became more lively, and most importantly, he was smiling. Against her will, the princess was embarrassed. She knew it was him, but she thought that he, like her, would be busy with business. The king assured her that she need not worry about it. He had already sorted it out completely. Etna felt a slight twinge of envy when she realized that the king had sorted out all the internal affairs in just a year. She left as if they would never see each other again. It was not nice of her. Slightly embarrassed and looking down, the king awkwardly admitted that he wanted to see her faster, so he decided to bring her something. He came here for the sake of marriage and learned that offering is a sign of respect in the human world. He must have surprised everyone. He certainly surprised Princess Atina when he started talking about marriage. The king did not take his hungry eyes off her, which spoke for him. He reached for her hand and squeezed it tenderly. This time he would ask her about it. The princess was still wondering if this was a dream when the king dropped to one knee. Turning his deep emerald eyes on her, he asked if she would marry him. For a moment, the princess forgot how to breathe. She laughed heartily and nodded, of course. Beside himself with happiness, the king picked up his beloved and spun her around in the air. Long ago, on a cliff illuminated by the sun's rays, there was a beautiful fairy tale kingdom. And next to it was an equally beautiful kingdom, bathed in bright light. They had been at war with each other for a long time, but thanks to the efforts of two great rulers, peace was achieved. Songs and fairy tales were composed about the love story of the two rulers. The king still could not get used to it when his wife addressed him affectionately. Every time he was embarrassed, as if it were the first time. Before he could even realize what was happening, his beloved pushed him onto the bed. To prevent her from suddenly running away, she sat down on top, her shadow looming threateningly over one. Etna smiled bloodthirstily. Maybe it was time for them to try to have a baby, and they lived happily ever after. That's the end.